I hope that everyone is having a great time at day one at MOSIP Connect. We had such amazing sessions, interactive sessions. So now we have session on exploring emerging opportunities, go-to-market strategy. Dr. Pramod Varma, Center for DPI, along with Mr. Sasikumar Ganesan, Head of Engineering MOSIP. We'll have a small fireside chat to explore the opportunities. Sashi, I would like to call you on the stage.
This is going to be an exciting chat. I and Pramod worked for a very long time, but never a conversation like this.
I have to go closer, I think.
Okay. So
I don't think we ever sat like this and chatted, yeah?
No. I think most of it has been tech and security discussions, and this is going to be a little of a larger one. So definitely this is an exciting time. Quick introduction to people who don't know Pramod. Pramod is the chief architect of Aadhaar, which is the India's national ID, which issued 1.2 billion. If I'm not wrong, that's a 1.39 billion IDs, and it's the largest biometric identity system in the world. He has also been the architect of DigiLocker and the UPI, which is the largest payment in the world again. And he has been behind quite a lot of DPIs that's happening around the world today. So excited to have you, Pramod, here.
It's fantastic to be back. Nothing like coming from airport straight to the panel.
Your energy is amazing, Pramod. It just brings us back to those 15 years before discussions. Okay. I'll start from the basics, Pramod. This DPI story has been a very exciting time, and I think we want to start with why do we need DPI for countries? And it seems to be more advocated for countries rather than generally DPI, right? We would like to understand, what do you think?
Yeah, I think the digitization has been going on for a while. I mean, everybody knows we have been digitizing since what, 90s mostly, most of the digitization efforts. But I think in the last decade or so, not just India, several countries started experimenting on the idea that you can create a digital reusable building block. Reuse is the key, really. Identity, I mean, that's what you guys do, I know. So identity was almost always the obvious reusable element, because ID spans every system and payments span every system. So I think most countries looked at ID and payment almost in the last decade, you know. But I think the last year, during the G20, I think the common vocabulary, common terminology was defined, and the word digital public, or the phrase digital public infrastructure, was coined under the G20 discussions to call what many of you have been already doing, right? To say, if you are building digital reusable building blocks that can be reused by both public and private systems, you have a DPI. Why is it key? For us, it's very, very straightforward. Many software, notoriously, we are all part of it, okay? When you build software, it's easy to build software in one sense and easy to, sort of do it your way. So it's like saying, imagine in physical infrastructure, you decide, I need my own road. And somebody says, no, I'll build my own road. It doesn't happen because it is just bloody tough and it's expensive. But in software, it's not tough to screw it up. Okay, it's quite easy to screw it up, actually, yeah. So what we have been traditionally doing is that you put out a project and I want to build the whole thing. It's also to do with the mindset that why should I be dependent on another department or another player in the system? So many reasons, people tend to build the whole thing again and again and again. It makes no sense. It makes no sense because it's just ridiculous to redo that, especially when you're using taxpayers' money. It makes no sense. So I think the idea of DPI is that there are many pieces of that puzzle that can be created as reusable elements in a digital society. If you can extract those and create a reusable building block and element, you are doing DPI. Very high chance many of you are already doing DPI.
So that's an interesting definition about the comparison of multiple roads and software. I would see in a construction of a road or any physical tangible items, you know what a success is. Now you define something, a new term, DPI, at least existence for the last 3-4 years. Now, how do you define this success? Because a completion of a road is a successful one. You know what it is, you've done and you're completed, and the work exists for everybody to see and use. What do you think is the success of a DPI?
Let's stick with the same example. Is building the road success enough or using the road success
It depends
enough?
on who gets the payment, I think so.
Yeah.
You get the payment once you
I
build
agree.
the road.
Yeah, so from a builder perspective, you're right. Many people would say, just issue the ID or just build the road. I'm done with my part, and hence I can call myself success. But real success, I mean, if you take a step back, real success of a DPI is really twofold, exactly twofold. One, it has the use of the DPI, usage of the DPI, usage of the road, usage of the ID, usage of the payment. Usage has unblocked or unlocked significant societal value for citizens. It has unlocked value. That means people say, my God, I love the fact that this highway has come. It has reduced my time. It's easier for me. You know, my school is closer. Whatever it is, it has unlocked value. Point number one. Point number two, it also must unlock a private and public and private innovation ecosystem. Because otherwise it's not sustainable. To sustain any such infrastructure, you must create that domino effect to trigger an ecosystem of public and private players who can build on top of that road or on top of that DPI. If we can build applications, innovations, new forms of vehicles, new way of driving, whatever you want to innovate, if you can build innovation, both public and private innovation, with these two, you can call your DPI successful. So you look back to ask this question to yourself. Is your DPI being used every day by people? Question number one. Question number two, are there private and public ecosystem, other departments, other private entities who are actually building applications and they become the spokesman for your DPI? Then you have it. That's your success.
Okay, that's a good definition to have, and I think that would help our audience and countries to define that. And in fact, it's easier to define. Now it looks like
it's
how
hard
many,
though,
huh?
because one of the issues it's easier to define, but most people shy away from defining usage metrics, because I am an ID issuing department. My job is to issue ID. Usage, how? I don't even have authority. I don't have control. I don't have any, mechanism to ensure its usage by somebody else. So it's a little bit hard. So people tend to shy away, but I think India's definitely difference was that I think our DPI builders publicly announced usage metrics. Publicly said, we will have 1 billion payments a day, like crazy numbers, It's sort of, you need some leadership. So if the leadership is bold enough, you can. And that completely flips the game.
Okay, that's great. So the next interesting question that keeps coming across, what do you think is the biggest top three, four challenges that you think in adapting DPI? Because while we have been speaking about it for the last 5 years, India has been doing for 10 years, a decade or more, and still the adoption is lower than what you would have envisaged, right? And what do you think is the top challenges that's preventing people from taking in this path?
Yeah, that's another little bit tricky issue about DPI. DPI is like your physical infrastructure. It is a digital infrastructure. What is the meaning of infrastructure? Any infrastructure investments, by the time you start seeing the ROI and start seeing the real usage, it takes time. And at least from India's experience, we normally see roughly about 2 years when it kicks into the early gear, about 5 years when it becomes the talk of the town, and it's about 8 years by the time it becomes 70–80% of sort of take it for granted. Time of decade. That's long for it's long for politicians. It's long for bureaucrats. It's 10 years is long. Nobody plans 10 years. So you have to break it down. Break down your success metrics into quantum of 12 to 18 months or 24 months, at max 24 months. Ideally 12 to 18 months. You have to define those milestones, and you have to make sure you celebrate those milestones. Celebration is part of establishing in the society. Okay, so it's very important. But the real challenges are this. DPI is a long game. It is an infrastructure game. It's a long game, so you need to have patience capital. You need leadership to support you to say, yes, I know eventually by the time you get to it, it's going to be 8 years. UPI, which started in 2014, design 2015 pilot, 2024.
Yep.
It's
10
almost
years.
8 years, right? 10 years by the time we designed. Aadhaar is 15 years, identity system. So time flies by. It's crazy by the time it takes time. But you can define intermediary metrics and celebrate. You need leadership. So political support is a big challenge. And you need to garner the political support for you as a bureaucrat if you're running the system. You absolutely need. You definitely need early adopters. The real success comes from usage, I told you, right? The usage does not come from, usage almost always do not come from incumbents. That means you don't go after, when you lay a payment rail, you don't go after the largest bank. Largest social protection. When we started our social protection transformation, what's called direct benefits transfer, G2P, we did not go after the largest two. In fact, largest two is still not DBT in India.
DBT, yeah.
15 years later, we still have not fully DBTized, not fully G2P, right? Because it takes, that's tough. Because it can completely shake up a political landscape if it fails. So people don't take bet on largest one. So you look for medium-sized programs or medium-sized players in the system, young banks or early departments to actually come in and support you. We started with a very small program on G2P, for example, scholarship, which was very easy. Pension was very easy for us because they were starting to get digital anyway. Okay, so it was easier to go there. That's a big challenge. So crafting the adoption, who will be your biggest partner, is a challenge. Make sure that is very carefully navigated. Third, killer use cases. How do you unlock value for citizens? What would you do to make sure in 3 to 4 years, not 10 years, in 3 to 4 years, a large enough population in this country is praising it and raving about it. Oh, this is awesome. Love it. Then politicians are raving about it. They take the success for it. And you're starting to get this escape velocity, right? You need that. You need to make sure that you look for a killer use case, what's called a killer use cases. So that's third. And the fourth one, of course, you have to worry about civil society, negative implications of anything you roll out. And if you don't carefully analyze who will get hurt with your DPI, somebody is going to get hurt, right? It's because you are transforming, you are re-engineering a society, and someone is either information asymmetry, middlemen, somebody is enjoying the status quo. So please make sure that analysis is happening. They'll be the first one to attack you, right? So like Mahatma Gandhi said, first 2 years, no one actually cares. They just leave you alone. So you have a real good window in the first 2 years to get something going. Then everybody wakes up to attack you, right? And then finally they sort of come along. I think that's what we went through, every one of them. Not forget identity system. Some obvious ones like payment also went through the same thing. We were killed, literally. Our UPI payment system would have been dead twice in the last 8 years. Thankfully, we didn't die. Yeah. So challenges are plenty.
That's a helpful insight. I think in one sense, MOSIP is going through the same phase. We are 5 years down the line now, and there's being big adoptions being spoken, and now critics are waking up. We see a lot more critic than we used
unlock
to see.
value for citizens and ecosystem. They will be the biggest spokesperson. Issuance, ID issuance, building is not enough. Supply side is not enough. Demand has to be unlocked.
Interesting, and now that we spoke about demand and how do we actually do this. So this looks like a very, very long-running time and long-running advice kind of a thing is needed for the government to really do this. And I also hear that you're now heading the CDPI, which is the other DPI hosted out of IIITB. How are you positioning this? How are you actually envisaging this is going to help the countries? What's your leading thought process behind the CDPI?
Yeah, so I think the CDPI stands for Center for Digital Public Infrastructure. It's an academic center within IIIT Bangalore, where MOSIP is also hosted. We are a global team. Our team is here. Many of them are here. We have folks in Africa. We have folks in LATAM. It's completely pro bono. It's done as a philanthropic funded initiative. Why? Why did we do that? One gap we saw is the gap of design. And I recently spoke to a set of design graduates to say, while you can argue execution is everything, design, if you get the design wrong, no use executing to death, because you're executing a wrong plan, right? So it is important to get design right. And DPI is by design. Infrastructure, by the nature of it, almost always starts to become national critical infrastructure. Payment and identity, credentialing, or data infrastructure you might have. The significant thought process that needs to go behind to make sure you have sovereign control, you sort of shaping your destiny yourself. And you are creating evolvability and future-proofing, incentive alignment, ecosystem incentive alignment. Someone has to think through this really well. So that you don't have the cost overruns, vendor lock-ins, and project failures, and those kind of things, right? And we went through many of this in our experience. We thought, what if we create this center for offering this architecture and design support while the countries begin or in the way of their DPI journey. Countries reach out, just like Zoom calls sometimes, they say, let's talk to you. No formality is needed. They just talk to us. But sometimes they send us the design document. Their internal design document say, we are thinking about this way, G2P architecture. Can you just look at it and just because you've seen so many different architecture patterns, can you see some and give us input? Yeah, sure, all that things work. Some of the countries actually go into a letter of intent or an MOU kind of relationship with CDPI because they have slightly long-term relationship. And some countries, we have about 4 countries, I think, we will end up doing actual hand-holding the pilot effort as well. But CDPI offers no software. We offer no solution. We offer you have nothing to do with India per se. We are simply here to look at your design and give you inputs. Because we have been there, we have done it, and we know exactly the kind of traps you fall into getting the design. Like a few lines can shift the design to getting it right and getting it wrong. It's very little. That shift is very little difference. So we are just here to support, and people ask, how are you raising fund and sustaining? We have raised from philanthropic fund, and the real objective is that we cease to exist in 5 years.
Okay.
We
that's
shouldn't be
great.
there. You guys should be doing it. So naturally, we have enough DPI fellows who have DPI trained folks, naturally starting to think. You give a problem, they unbundle, they think like that, and they'll say incentives, what will write. I know they have a method to that madness, and we happily continue to do whatever we want to do in life. That's what CDPI is.
That's a great thing that you're thinking 5 years, but your actual DPI story is like 10 years.
But they don't need us. That's the whole idea. If everybody needs us, we have a problem.
Absolutely
Yeah.
brilliant. I love that idea of shutting down in 5 years and telling people, hey, you're intelligent enough to run it, don't worry.
Yeah.
Right? I think that builds a confidence to a lot of people out here. This may be tangent. I'm not very sure how whether it's a tangent to CDPI or other one. Recently, I read about your paper. I think it came out 2 weeks before.
Yeah.
About the story of DAS.
Yeah.
You're trying to package something around, and I know you're packaging the CDPI as an advisory solution or a design solution think box. Now, what's this DAS story? What are you trying to do around that?
Yeah, so this, we put out, we have been talking to many of you, by the way, and constantly getting this feedback that countries are ready to do it, we have the intent, fund, we are ready, but just the fact that they have to go through the motion of deciding who is going to be my partner in crime in a country to write, it's typically a consulting firm. To decide that consulting firm, I have to put out an RFP, then choose the consulting firm. Then consulting firm helps me decide what I should be building, the DPI. And unfortunately, even in India, right? Government procurement rules are very sort of tight. What does it mean? These contracts are 5 years to 8 years. That means you as a DPI owner has to now decide in the next 3 months or 5 months as you write your RFP, everything you want to build ever in the next 8 years. And remember, ChatGPT didn't exist a year and a half ago. So the speed at which things change and the government contracting nature are in conflict. They don't work at all, okay? So one of the things that we have been asking, is there a faster way that you can go through the cycles of this adoption? Political leaders and bureaucrats want to see the light of the day. It's not their interest to entertain themselves on a software project for 36 months. It might be interest of some of the software guys just to entertain themselves. But leaders don't want it. Leader wants to see citizen value unlocking on the ground. That's why I think we looked at it and we said, but how did private industries solve this? We have products, what's called commercial off-the-shelf products. If you want an email system, we don't start writing email system from scratch. If you want a Word document, you don't start writing. If you want an HR system, if you want a manufacturing system, or a financial system, you don't start writing from scratch anymore. Why? Because much of that knowledge can be absorbed into something what's called out-of-the-box, pre-productized offering. Now, in the private ecosystem, COTS products or commercial off-the-shelf product existed for a while. It's a no-brainer. Even government procures them. Second, recently, we will see software as a service is also becoming very popular. Why? Because you can convert your CapEx investment to OpEx. When you have a software as a service, because you can now say, I have 500,000 citizens, $1 per citizen per year, $5 per citizen, I want to run a digital signature or authentication system or something, right? So now your ability to actually move from custom building everything from scratch to productized offering, preferably cloud ready, private cloud also. It can be in private cloud. It doesn't have to be in public cloud, but cloud ready. That means fast rollout. And if you can create a cookie cutter mechanism, we believe many of the DPIs can be accelerated. Not all. Now you can don't take on the one exception and attack me, okay, on this. There are some DPIs which will just take time. Tough luck. Because it requires larger conversations, legislation changes, some of that, okay? No problem. Go through the normal route. But there are many DPIs. Education, healthcare, registries, farmer registries. It doesn't, it's not a legislation problem. You're already doing it. So how can we do it faster, cheaper? And that's a real question. So we called it DAS because, sort of sounded good. And DPI as a product size service. What does it mean is that we could take, unlike private intellectual property in the commercial product, when it comes to DPI, the kernel or the engine of the car, engine of the DPI, preferably should be open source, preferably. Because it's becoming national critical infrastructure. You don't want your national critical infrastructure. If it's used by population, entire population, you don't want the engine to be completely locked out and then, somebody can shut it off because you didn't pay and all kinds of things, right? So you can use digital public goods, DPGs, open source effort. And you guys are doing it, and we have many other open source effort here showcased. You can take an open source effort, but instead of saying, hey, go and take open source and do your own thing, you could actually take open source, create use cases, package it as if a commercial vendor will do, as if a commercial vendor. That kind of rigor of packaging. If you can get that packaging well, countries will benefit immensely. But that actually means now you can open up that DPI faster to the private ecosystem to create value-added layers on top of DPI. So you can use open source in the kernel or the engine, but on the periphery, there can be many types of applications. And they can all be private sector. You should encourage, idea of DPI is to encourage private innovation as well. So public rails, private innovation. I think that's the magic we are after.
So in a sense, if I associate, some of the APIs of the Linux kernel has not changed for the last probably 20 years.
Yeah.
Right? If you follow the Linux kernel APIs, they
operating system.
No change.
Yeah, nobody needs to start writing operating system from scratch. But somebody needs to package it. Somebody needs to support it. Somebody needs to give you bug fixing SLAs. Somebody needs to train your people. Somebody needs to roll it out. Somebody needs to, do business process engineering if required. So there is a significant layer of innovation you can do even if the engine is open source, I think. Yeah.
Absolutely. I think internally inside MOSIP, Pramod, if you're not aware, there's a lot of thought process going on in terms of creating a marketplace where the value-added services could be built above the open source kernel core, right? It's completely commercial play, but at the same time, it doesn't lock the natural DPI that you're building in, right? It's built above it, and it's like a cookie cutter. So you could choose, the designs that are there in place, how it works. You build it or you buy it. The design and the interaction seems to be very standardized in a model. And I'm assuming that's a thinking process that you're going down.
No, that's actually brilliant. If you are rolling out a DPI, and if you are thinking that you will do the whole thing yourself, you simply miss the point of DPI. DPI is to launch extremely minimalistic infrastructure and allow innovation by private sector and public sector. Wherever government is involved, they can also innovate, other departments.
Correct.
But wherever private sector, advantage with private sector innovation on top of DPI is that their incentives to sustain the infrastructure is much higher, which is what we saw with payments. When we laid the payment rail, we had a reference application by the government just to get it started, to sort of bootstrap the system. But private sector took on like crazy, and they went and stuck QR codes in 100 to 200 million touch points. Government can't do. It's just expensive. And it's not worth doing all that thing. Build the highway and let private innovation thrive.
Absolutely. The other interesting point, you spoke about the expensive, and it just clicked me immediately, right? One of the conversations that we have been having, I think this is like a 3-4 years of conversation that we are having. Every time we meet a country discuss or anyone they will discuss, there is a considerable amount of cost and sustainability that comes into DPI, right? What do you think is the return of investment, or I don't know, how do you actually compute this model to tell, what does it cost for me to maintain and sustain this DPI for the next 15, 20 years, that like what you did in UIDI and other places? What do you think, and how do you cost compute them?
I think we can take the same learning from physical infrastructure as well. How do you sustain a highway? You apply something called a toll charges. Toll charges are typically a utility charges. Mm-hmm. It's not necessarily meant to like a profitability, to push profitability up. It's not a private sector effort to say, I want to 5 times profitable. Just to sustain, right? So what's called a toll pricing models are what's called utility pricing models. Those pricing models that allow you to charge the utility to sustain. But you have to think like a utility. So first question you have to ask is that people ask me, how long or how much money India, for example, took for DPIs. If you put together all the DPIs, identity, digital signature, which you and I
worked on,
wrote, yeah, DigiLocker, unified payment, which is a payment infrastructure, which we did 12 billion transactions last month, plus data sharing infrastructure, combined. In the last 15 years, India has spent less than $2 billion. And we have 1.39 billion people on the ID system. We have 12 billion per month payments in the system. We have 1,300 G2P programs driving, I think $70 billion every month. Total $325 billion sent through G2P pipe. All this happened in the last 15 years. And the entire spend by the government so far has been less than $2 billion. And identity was the somewhat expensive of the lot because it was a sovereign function to give ID. But when it comes to data, credentialing, payment we spent $2 million to launch, or $500,000 to build, and less than $1 million to launch, and we spent about that. Credentialing infrastructure in the last 10 years, we have spent $8 million.
On the credential.
Entire DigiLocker.
DigiLocker entirely.
10 years. We have only spent $8 million.
And that covers a pretty large population of the country.
Today, we have 250 million users, 249 million users with 6.5 billion credentials on that system. Total spend, $8 million US dollars. These are rounding error. Think about it. Really, if you look at it. Now, it's funny because why? In the DPI case, the cost gets distributed. That's a difference. When you build your highway, when you build yourself, you build your own transport vehicle, you run your own transport, you're on top of the highway, you run everything yourself, then the cost accumulates. When you build just the highway, digital infrastructure, unlike physical infrastructure, is cheaper, the cost of adoption gets distributed in the ecosystem. And that's why the actual cost of DPI is very low, but the impact is high.
Correct. The absorption goes into the ecosystem rather than the
entire ecosystem, because that comes back to the 2 success criteria. Population scale unlocking of value for citizens and unlocking value for private and public ecosystem to innovate. They will take the cost. Credentialing, we just walked out of a credentialing meeting. One of the countries, leading African countries, and they're going to literally start next week. I hope. It'll be brilliant if they start. They will, I think. Mm-hmm. If they do that. And the first question was that there are private universities, private schools, private colleges. Can private ecosystem go and actually support credentialing for them? That means workflows, mark sheet issuance, certificate issuance workflows. Why should government go and solve all these things? So many workflows, so many systems. Can private ecosystem be incentivized? Answer is yes. And that's exactly how the cost is going to be distributed. By the way, we are asked to just cut off. Yeah, yeah.
I know we're like
I think you're done.
5 minutes late, and I could continue this conversation for another half an hour. But
right.
thanks, Pramod. It was a pleasure to
No,
speak
lovely to be
you.
here. I walked into this hotel and energy was absolutely palpable, unbelievable.
Thank you. Thank
And
you.
somebody even hugged me even before I took shower, which I don't know why. He said, yay, MOSIP Connect. Okay, whatever. It's brilliant. I love it. I love being here.
Thank you, Pramod. It's
Lovely. Lovely talking to all of you. Take care.
Thank you.
All the best. Yeah.